A very good evening to you and welcome to this Friday's edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo. Cabinet reshuffles the world over always come with the promise of a better future for their nations. On the one hand, they offer heads of state or government the opportunity to press that reset button, which then allows them to correct wrongs and make up for lost time and opportunities. On the other hand, they give the rest of the populace hope that things may just get better this time around, or at least better than before. Our two sets of guests this evening represent significant players in the country's economy, constituencies we can't do without, but whose voices are often ignored or undermined. The General Secretaries of Labour Federations COSATU, FEDUSA and SAFTU, as well as small business advocacy groups, tell us how they feel, their hopes, their fears and aspirations following last night's reshuffle. The Watchdog starts now. Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has sworn in the newly appointed ministers and deputy ministers announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa in his cabinet reshuffle last night. Ramaphosa said the changes made to his cabinet were meant to improve the capacity of government. The Ministry of Water and Sanitation was separated from Human Settlements, while the Ministry of State Security was done away with, and political responsibility for it now lies with the Office of the President. SABC politics reporter Natasha Piri attended today's ceremony at the Union Buildings and filed this report.
As well as
a jovial atmosphere as the new ministers and their deputies were sworn in. President Ramaphosa and Acting Chief Justice Zondo took time to share light moments ahead of proceedings. And then it was down to business. First up was Enoch Godongwana taking the oath of office as the new finance minister.
Swear that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa.
Godongwana was followed by ministers Mondli Gungubele, who's now the minister in the presidency, and Dr. Joe Phahla as the Minister of Health, as well as the newly minted deputy ministers. Speaking after the ceremony, Minister Phahla committed to meeting the targets for South Africa's COVID-19 vaccination programs. Phahla is not new to the health portfolio, as he has served as a deputy minister since May 2014. In 1994, he was appointed as the MEC of Health in Limpopo under the new democratic dispensation. He says that the department will push to meet the target of vaccinating 300,000 South Africans a day and a minimum of 1 million people a week. Phahla described the resignation of his predecessor, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, as unfortunate and said he and his team would work to restore the image of the health ministry. Mkhize resigned on Thursday amidst allegations of procurement irregularities linked to communication company Digital Vibes.
Well, it was quite an unfortunate development, which we know that has cast a dark cloud on the department. So we will do everything possible in terms of just assuring the public that indeed we're going to do everything by the book in line with all the regulations of procurement and other administrative and management rules.
Minister in the presidency, Mondli Gungubele, who has replaced the late Jackson Mthembu, defended President Ramaphosa's decision to do away with the Ministry of State Security and place the responsibility for intelligence with his office. The agency has for years been embroiled in scandals, with the 2018 high-level review panel finding widespread abuse of the intelligence services and evidence of it being used for political ends and ANC factional battles. The 64-year-old once served as the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Social Development and also served as the mayor of Ekurhuleni.
I see nothing wrong in President shifting it into his space so that stabilization of such a sensitive institution is fast-tracked, because that's one institution that can't be found wanting even for a minute. So in that context, I think tactically what the President has done, taking into account the challenges we've been facing recently, I think the president is on course.
The appointment of the new finance minister has not been without controversy. Political parties like the EFF and UDM have been critical of Godongwana's selection. He has chosen to ignore his critics and has vowed to run a tight ship as he has big shoes to fill with the voluntary exit of Tito Mboweni.
I'm familiar with that. You know, the people who are trying to resuscitate it, I don't know for what purpose. Because what I did at the time, not now, what I did at the time, I resigned from government, something which has never happened. And after resigning, I dealt with that matter without tenanting the office. Having dealt with it, I've managed to clear myself.
For now, the new appointees will have to hit the ground running in their various portfolios to ensure that they effectively undertake the tasks bestowed upon them. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.
So, did the workers like what the president had to say last night and the little the new ministers could say today after they were sworn in? Between them, COSATU, FEDUSA and SACTU have over 3 million members. Let's welcome the three federation secretaries, Bheki Njalinjali, Zwelinzima Vavi and Rifda Ajam. Good evening to all of you and thank you so much for agreeing to come through. Mr. Njalinjali, let me start with you. Just in a nutshell, what you made of last night's reshuffle?
No, we noted the shuffle. Is the president's prerogative to do so. We'll have expected a number of changes, including the question of the size of the cabinet, the aligning of the department, which unfortunately did not happen. So we see the team, we'll watch them as you indicating that we're watchdogs, and we are going to hold them accountable. So there's nothing exciting about the new team. That is a question of giving them an opportunity. We don't know some of the thinking behind the shuffling. Our view has been that if you are not good in one department, you should be dropped. You should not be recycled.
Okay. Zwelinzima Vavi?
Well, on the side of our federation, earlier today we issued a statement on what we think should have been the core message issued by a president who have seen unprecedented levels of revolts in the streets of South Africa, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, who is sitting a title of sorry, David, disturbance there, Bill.
Okay, let's hope, I think the guys are listening, they're trying to fix that if it's on our side. You can continue so long.
Well, I'll say that the president is in an unfortunate position in that he leads a country regarded as the protest capital of the world, with 5 and more major protest actions taking place in his land. This is the country that have 2 unfamiliar titles. It is a country with worst kinds of unemployment amongst industrializing and industrialized economies. It is the country that is the most unequal in the world. It is the country whose 2/3 of its population is living in poverty. It's a country which have a judicial or criminal judicial system that have just collapsed, with every day seeing 58 people dying violently, and with the conviction rates in our court down to a miserable 15%.
So
a president facing that situation would have not missed an opportunity to speak to South Africa directly and say, we are making these changes in order to address the principal problem of South Africa, which is the crisis of unemployment and poverty.
An opportunity was missed.
It's absolutely missed.
Rifda, your take?
Thank you very much for the opportunity once again, and greetings to my fellow leadership on the panel there. Yes, from Fiduci's side, we have equally noted the reshuffling that has occurred last night, and it comes with mixed reaction in terms of, once again, an opportunity that has been lost due to the size of cabinet being extended instead of being reduced to be able to respond and reposition in order to improve on service delivery to the nation. And when we speak about opportunities that should have been maximized in this instance, we speak about the opportunities with regards to the decisiveness that we were looking towards in terms of cracking the whip for inefficiencies. This is no time to be rewarding and reshuffling around ministers for inefficiency, in particular in the security cluster where the nation needs stability at this juncture. So once again, positive and negative moves that have been made, but we are here to extend that oversight responsibility to ensure that we do a service, a great service to our members that are represented in many of those economic sectors. So yes, it's been a mixed bag of reactions for us, many creating some form of stabilities, but other seriously questionable.
Okay, let's start with that size and alignment issue you're raising, Peggy and Chalinchali. This is what the president promised right at the beginning when he took over after elections. And there's been this whole exercise that's supposed to have been going on for a good couple of years now. And one would have thought, as your statement notes, that something would have been done to both realign and reduce the size of the cabinet. Instead, it has actually been expanded. What is that telling you about, one, promises that have been made, and two, whether indeed the president, is living up to the promises that that he made? If you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. There were no reason provided as to what led the president even to extend the department. Safe to say that some of the department and the work in combining two departments might be too huge. We had thought that in the past 2 years of trying to align the department, there would have been some lesson learned, whether it was appropriate for some of the department to be brought together. If you bring two departments together, for an example, what has been the lesson learned? There has been no explanation in that directive. One of the departments that I think everybody agreed from the beginning, that was the Department of the Public Enterprise, which was established in the main to privatize the state-owned enterprises. We had thought there was an agreement that that department should be dismantled and those agencies should be aligned to line department if we're to honor the question that we are no longer going ahead with privatization. That department still exists. That department is collapsing in every state-owned enterprises. We'll have loved that that department should have been disintegrated and be aligned to line department. It has not happened. But there's no explanation given as to why that approach has not bear some fruit. We'll have loved to get explanation. We understand the explanation given in relations to the housing, the settlement, and the issues of the water and sanitation. We concur with the view that the issue of water and sanitation, particularly the water one, is a huge department. We don't have water. There are no water in many, many rural areas. It needs a focused attention. In that, we are sympathetic to that department getting its own ministers. But ministers alone are not enough. It's not the ministers that do the work. It's the supporting staff, including the Director General, that in our view, we should be looking exactly to the people who are doing the work how they are being structured.
What is your take, though? There's a view out there that presidents, never like to do this or reduce their cabinet because usually of internal dynamics within the governing parties, because some patronage has to be dispensed, because all the little groupings or power blocks, have to be pacified. But what is your take? What do you think is responsible for this, for something that he actually promised when he started?
Our view is that a president elected by over 11 million people is not elected by the ANC for this matter. He has to be accountable to the electorate rather than his political party. And there's nothing really in our view that should be binding him not to take the decisive action. He's responsible to the electorate. His legacy should be and his allegiance should be to the public.
Okay.
The fear that we have is that he's not explaining his action in regard to these issues, and we don't want to be thinking that the balances within his party is making him not to act. Some of the people that are, in our view, are not performing well, are not in another faction. We don't know the faction quite clearly, but there are people who are closer to his own faction,
who are not
and they are not performing well,
okay,
and they should be removed without fearing what other people will say.
Zwelinzima Vavi, you've recounted, many of the problems that are plaguing this country and that have brought it to where we are right now. If the president had not missed the opportunity, as you say, what would he have said, or what could he have said to give the nation the kind of confidence we need that from now on things are going to change for the better?
Well, you should have first acknowledged that this is the problem we're dealing with. The second issue that we think that he should have done is to say we cannot continue to repeat what we have seen dismally failing the unemployed, the youth and the women, the black people of this country. We're now changing the track. We are going back to the demands of the Freedom Charter that promise our people that they shall share in the wealth of the country. That's the first thing that we think that we should have done. In announcing the Minister of Finance, who is the current chairperson of the Economic Transformation Committee of the ANC, a minister who in May 2020 made a very promising statement to the country in his capacity as the minister, when he said, one, we have a plan of reconstruction and recovery that must be treated like a post-war reconstruction situation. And we quote him, we must do whatever it takes to ensure that we limit the damage to our country, society, and people, and get our economy back into the path of recovery. And that ETC document would have gone to say what ought to happen. And I want just to mention 3 steps. They said, we need a program to expand social and economic infrastructure. We need a program to invest to improve the performance of network industries. We need policies to strengthen trade and investment linkages with other countries across the African continent. And in announcing that ministry, you should have said, that's your mandate. We are asking you to do something about it. We were expecting a president that will say, in addition to the fact that we are losing 58 lives every day violently in our streets, we're going to make wholesale changes in our security cluster. All of the ministers that oversaw the absolute disaster of 3 weeks ago are going to have to leave. I need a new team that is going to address that crisis of a collapsing criminal justice system. That's the second thing, most important thing that he would have done in the light of what we saw in the streets of KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. What we saw yesterday was absolutely nothing to do with all of that. It was basically rearranging the chairs and to massage, as we said, the factional battles of the ANC. And it has absolutely very little to do with advancing any interest of the country. I think Kosato Jirasaritari Beginjalinjali is perfectly putting that across. The only worry I will have is that, and in Kosa, this is what they say, if they complain like this being part of the alliance and who have access to the president who is their candidate and who are being consulted, how much more to us who are completely on the sidelines and the periphery, and which is a tragedy that I think Costato must debate internally to debate whether really this maintaining this alliance in its current existing form is of any benefits to workers, both in the public service and in general. So that's the point that I think the trade union movement must debate in South Africa. What does this continuous dithering on the part of the president mean? Because to us, it means unity has become much more important than any other time instead of continuing with the current business. That simply empowers the elites to continue to exploit the working people in the most brutal way you can imagine.
Okay, now Rifda, you take a, should I say, slightly different view to what SAFTU takes, because your statement says, and this is like the very first paragraph, that you welcome these changes, especially the president's attempt to strengthen the security cluster to ensure safety of all citizens and stability of our country, which means that you seem to think that progress was made in reorganizing the security cluster, presumably the first step in addressing the issues that Zwelinzima Mabavi was raising just now.
Yes, absolutely. We are not oblivious nor ignorant to the fact that the attempted insurrection that had occurred in both KwaZulu-Natal as well as Gauteng had costed the economy approximately 50 billion. And we are looking for decisiveness at this point in time. And whilst, we emphasize in our statement that, Minister Ayanda Lodlo, she's been reshuffled around, and somehow the other, it did not give us any form of appeasement that she is dealing with such an important portfolio and now being taken back to public service. But the real issue is whether or not the presidency, by virtue of that portfolio, will now be able to strengthen the arm. It is a very first in terms of government trying to extend that oversight mechanism and give the South African public the reassurance that they will be able to take the fight, not only in serving and protecting the president, as we have seen from that former minister in that particular portfolio that she served, but it will serve as a protection measure for the general public at large. And in this way, we are hoping that through that leadership, through that demonstration of that process, we will be able to be guided. We will be able to see some form of change so that these type of attempts to undermine South African society can be buried in the history books and it will never ever be repeated. So we want to move this country forward. We want to build this country, and we can only do that together. But what has happened now with that particular security cluster, not to mention Minister Bheki Cele, how he has been shielded from the process. But for now, cracking the whip and making sure that that portfolio is given the elevation that it is required from at this stage gives us some form of assurance right now.
Okay.
But over and above that, as we said, it's a mixed bag of reactions, because you cannot rob from Peter to give to Paul and continue to extend that protection where that minister in particular should have been given the crack at the end of the day. So we are hoping that with this bold move that has been made by the presidency, some form of reassurance will be re-established, and that the general public at large will be protected, and not only to serve the interest as was done previously with former President Zuma.
Okay, now, Begin Chalanchali, FEDUSA in its statement also says that the president missed another good opportunity to bring in more skilled youth into his cabinet. And I'm reading that together with what your statement says, that you are, and I quote, disappointed that the president recycled the same old guard that has proven itself incapable of fixing our many problems. What could he have done instead?
There's an issue that is debated within the labor movement, is the role of the deputy ministers. And I think many people, they don't know what the deputy ministers are doing. And if the deputy ministers are put there to learn, which in the main are young people, they should be given an opportunity. You can't be a deputy minister for the rest of your life. The deputy ministers for 15 years, they're not outgrowing and they miss the opportunity. Our view is that there are young people who, for an example, if you take Minister Lamula, I think he's doing well in our view. There should be exposure, particularly to the department, to the deputy ministers that have been there for some time. And if we appreciate that being put as a deputy minister, you are in a learning curve, so that you don't want people who have been ministers since the Mandela time and up to this stage, they are still regarded to be ministers and being recycled. Unless you have been performing exceptionally well, that everybody can say we still need the wisdom of that particular minister. It could be the only reason that you can still be remaining in the cabinet. We have not seen that happening. But we should also, I think, agree to a certain extent with FEDUSA that not everything that has been done we can just rubbish. I mean, there's been a new minister in the presidency. We think that should be appreciated. The acting minister in the health, I think she has done wonderful work during the time she has been acting in that particular issues. The bringing of the security cluster to the president, I think in many countries they do that. The presidents needed to be briefed every day what is happening in terms of the intelligence. So there will be those issues, but the overall things that are being expressed, I think, by everybody is that something bigger than what we have seen should have been done in these instances. But the question of giving young people, nurture them, I think we need to do. There will be no time when you say people need experience. The deputy minister and that forum should be used to give people the insight of how governments work. We're not talking about just somebody who coming to the parliament for the first time and want to be a minister. We're not talking about that one. We're talking about people who are capable, who have skill and educated to the field, but who has to be nurtured and given opportunity. Let them do mistake and learn by doing. That's from what those. We stand for.
Okay, I have less than 2 minutes, but we can't conclude this conversation without me asking you about this much-awaited economic recovery plan. coming as it should on the back of this cabinet reshuffle, where there was a significant amount of a shake-up. I mean, a new finance minister, Minister Khumbudzo Ntshabeni, coming in as a new communications minister, and her predecessor in that portfolio, Stella Ndabeni, moving over to small business. I'm going to ask each and every one of you to give me 2-3 things that this cluster needs to focus on right now in order for South Africans to say there is indeed a change and that cabinet reshuffle was worth it. Quickly, Mr. Vavi.
I've already said so. So let me not repeat what I said when I said let's go back to the Freedom Charter. Let's hold the current Minister of Finance accountable to what he said in May 2020 in relation to what must happen in response to the pandemic at hand at this moment. So let me not go back there. Let me just address this issue. I fundamentally disagree with the notion that there was an insurrection. What I saw and what every South African saw in the streets of South Africa on the 9th of July to the 12th of July was young men and women with torn clothes and shoes going to the shops to grab a loaf of bread and omo to wash their washing. That's what in the main we saw, and that's not an insurrection. That's a powder keg imploding. That's a ticking bomb of poverty and inequalities that many of us have warned many days ago that it constitutes a real threat to the stability of South Africa and that it was not sustainable.
And that's what has to be dealt with.
Failure to address that is going to lead to another implosion, no matter what is going to trigger it.
Okay.
It can be something else other than Zuma or AIDS infection, but it is bound to happen in the country again.
Okay. Rifda?
Thank you. I think it is absolutely important right now that as we have co-created the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, that we ensure that its implementation in all facets is realized right now. We spoke about the localization debate and ensuring that the local manufacturing capacity can be expanded. More than ever now, we need local jobs to be created. We need to ensure that the high unemployment figures and the levels of inequality, as Mr. Vavi rightfully alludes to, can be addressed with absolute fervor. We can't afford to go back there now, and it was just a reaction to what is being seen there now. The ministers that have been appointed to small business at this stage, they need to give that leadership and that decisiveness that we are looking towards. We can only see the tourism sectors still attempting to recover from the massive challenges that they have been experiencing, including the hardships. And for that reason, they have to unlock the potential in the stimulus packages. And at the same time, greater relief needs to be extended by way of tax measures and other relief measures so that they can find themselves in this dilemma that we have been experiencing. So greater certainty, greater policy certainty, small businesses must be protected to recover in this process that we are looking towards. But more importantly, the localization agenda must be high priority for us to push this matter forward.
Begin, Charlie.
I must just say, destroying of factories, banning of factories has nothing to do with bread and butter issues. It's not stealing bread. If you go to a Mandeni and you ban a factory and you steal tires for cars and refrigerators and all those things, it's not about bread. It's a mere looting, is mere anarchy that we must all condemn. Secondly, we do have a plan. The Economic Recovery and Construction Plan is there. What we need is to allocate the necessary resources, and we must have the minister accountable. We need to implement that plan with the speed is required.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks to all three of you for coming through this evening. Zwelinzima Vavi, Begin Jalinjali, Rifda Ajam, all representing the respective federations. the workers' take on last night's cabinet reshuffle and what they hope the future will bring. Up next, we hear from advocates of small and medium enterprises, often dubbed the backbone of our economy. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. There was a big shake-up of the economic cluster yesterday. Among others, Enoch Godongwana replacing Tito Mboweni as finance minister, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni coming in as the new communications and digital technology minister, and her predecessor Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams taking over her small business development portfolio. Now, do some of the stakeholders think the shake-up was an inspired one? Well, let's welcome Black Management Forum President Andile Nomlala, SA Business, United Business President George Sebulela, and Small Business Institute CEO John Dludlu. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks very much for your time. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Nomlala. Quickly, your takeaways from last night's reshuffle.
Thanks, Fuyo, and thanks for inviting us. And good evening to your listeners, to your viewers. Look, it's quite a sad issue, Fuyo, that you find that type of recyclement that took place last night, and as Black professionals and youthful leaders, we believe that there should have been a lot more younger leaders. We welcome the appointment of Khumbudzo, obviously. Kubai, I think those ministers have distinguished themselves over the couple of years and in the cabinet. But we just very worried about the recyclement that takes place in government, trying to just shift the chairs and still leave things as they are. But I think we support the government, and we as Black professionals, we have offered ourselves to say that we want to be party to the solutions. We don't want to lament and cry foul when there's much work that needs to be done, and the masses of our people are caught in the squanders of poverty, and we need solutions. Black professionals are amongst the few groups of people that have benefited in the democratic dividends, and it's high time that we put our skills, our experience and knowledge in contributing to the progressive future of our country.
George Sebulela, what did you take away from last night's reshuffle?
Yeah, Vuyo, thank you so much for inviting SABC. Firstly, I think the president obviously has a very good intention in the restructuring of the government, with the intention to obviously make sure that the government is becoming very progressive. However, I think it could have been a great opportunity to really look at these performance agreements that exist currently and replace where it's necessary. One is, I do not think the Minister of Education has a position in government. She was supposed to really been reshuffled and take really serious. Education is the foundation of progressive, government anywhere in the world. If you look at the skills and that exist in this country, it's underpinned by education. Secondly, we also accolade the president. I think Minister Tito Mboweni is long overdue. Minister Tito Mboweni has already indicated right from the beginning, just after the appointment, that he was not really wanted to serve the government. It could have been done long time ago. He is, I think he has done literally nothing other than to reach the budget speech for us. And we hope that Comrade Enoch Godongwana will do much better than what the previous minister has done. The other thing is, if you look at what Nomlala has just mentioned, it could have been a great opportunity really to introduce young leadership. We need to move away from this wisdom of thinking that the older you are, the more experience you tend to be, particularly in leadership. And therefore, the other thing is I think the skill and qualification relevant to various departments is very critical. Hence, we are very happy with what happened in the Ministry of Health, which really demonstrated much more skill and experience.
John Lulu, what did you make of it all?
Congratulations for a good show and adding onto the SABC platform. A few points from us. Let me preface my remarks by saying the following. It is up to the ruling party and the president, as a deployee of the ruling party, as we know right now, to appoint people onto his executive, the national executive, known otherwise as the cabinet. What we are saying as the Small Business Institute, we're saying the following. We're saying that we obviously accept the fact that it's within his prerogative, and we are not in a co-governing alliance with the ruling party as well as the government. But we respect his right to choose his ministers. We also respect the fact that he recognized the noise outside the door. The noise outside the door was saying that there is need for change. He might not have made the right changes, but those are his changes as a democratically elected president of the country. So let me come to the two very consequential issues. The first one is what happens to the small businesses. According to the National Development Plan, the small businesses are supposed to contribute 90% of jobs by 2030. Right now, they are contributing only 28%, right? And according to another research from the CEO initiative, for us to reach that aspiration before COVID, we needed to be creating 39,000 sustainable SMEs every year. We were not there before COVID. And then if you look at the liquidations numbers, the liquidation numbers are in the double digits, over 10%. It means that we have regressed. And then COVID obviously set us back. And then there's this new crisis, which happened in the provinces of Gauteng and KZN. We are significantly behind. Here's the last point that I would like to make, Vuyo, which is that we don't seek to co-govern with the government. We are not elected officials as the business associations or as the advocacy associations. However, we have to accept what government has given us now. And we are willing to work with the ministers that have been given to us, Minister Stella Ndabeni, and we wish Minister Nchaveni well in a critically important portfolio, which is the communications and digital technologies.
Okay, but I mean, think about this. When I come to you in the next in the next round, Begin Chalinjali from COSATU, an ally of the governing party, making the point that yes, the government, it's a government of the ANC, but it should always be borne in mind that millions of people who are not necessarily card-carrying members of that organization actually elected them. But think about that in the meantime. I want to come to you, Mr. Nomlala. John Dludlu, like really in a very business-like way, captured, the essence of what the government broadly should be doing and what, the small business department is supposed to do, and the apparent or glaring failures that we have seen over the years. Now, you said when you started, there's no point in lamenting, let's talk solutions. Talk us through some of those solutions, please.
Thanks for the BMF has recently made a call, and the call says we need an economic recovery, rebuild, and growth or expansion command council. And that council should work similarly to the COVID council that we had. And what we need, Vuyo, is that government and more so politicians have been going out more often than not during manifestos. We know that there's going to be local government, and they talk about the number of jobs that they would create. And it's something that is coming out of their head. There's no specifics, there's no scientific computation of that. Now, what we need, Vuyo, is that our call is to say, let's look at the infrastructure plan and the program. And let's deal with just the 3 state-owned enterprises, Transnet, PRASA, and Sandral. And we say, how much money do we need? And I know, because we've engaged, as BMF, we've engaged with the EXCO of Transnet, we have engaged with the EXCO of PRASA. We yet to engage with Sandral. And we say, okay, these are the key infrastructure investments, social capital infrastructure, to be more precise, that would enable the economy. Let's start with the rail network and the transportation. If transportation in any economy is a backbone of a functionality of the economy. Now, you have to spend money to develop a proper rail network. You know the crises in Cape Town, you know the crises that we saw with Metro Rail, even in Mamelodi the other year with the president.
Just from those conversations, did you get a sense that you were not only being listened to, but actually heard?
Yes, Vuyo. Look, as the BMF, we've long taken a stance that we'd rather be a panacea to the solutions that we want in our country rather than to cry foul. Now, let me conclude with what I was saying. Now, PRASA, Transnet, and Sandral don't necessarily have the money. Between PRASA, Sandral, and Transnet, you could look at about 600 billion of infrastructure spend that they need. Now, there's capital markets, both domestic and abroad. There is money in the capital markets. The problem here is that the state, as things stand, doesn't have a 600 billion to spend on these investments. Now, we're saying, as the BMF, we have a plethora of top-class Black professionals in the financial services who can structure deals, who can do capital raise, who can then do project finance and manage these programs. And we are saying to government, all you need to do in that type of a conversation is to make sure that you create an enabling environment, you create a regulatory framework, you create a policy framework, you create off-take agreements, you create public-private partnerships that we can structure, and we can go as Black business people, Black professionals in particular, we can go to the capital markets and say, there's a project that can be funded by you guys, but government has endorsed it, and government has opened it up for it to be funded, so that the quantification of the jobs we're talking about can be based on the fact that which projects are we going to do and which jobs are they going to be created. And when you employ 10,000 Black people, you know that you're feeding 100,000 families. You're feeding 100,000 people.
Okay. George Sibulela, I mean, we know that there are also very real problems that SMMEs encounter. And among those problems is, the apparent responsiveness of the government, one, in supporting them, but two, in paying them. A lot of them complain a lot about how government departments and agencies actually don't pay them or don't pay them on time.
Vuyo, that's a very, very important question. But Vuyo, let's also deal with this principle. If the president has appointed the Minister of Small Business, and with due respect to the minister, because it's not her choice, but surely, and I heard what Lulu said, but in truth, if we want to build a successful performing government structure, we must begin to do introspection ourselves. We need to place people in right position. I'm not sure if the Minister of Small Business is the right person to be in the small business division. I thought she was doing very well in the ICT area, but honestly, government doesn't operate in isolation from business. I think we must demand in future that government, as it does consultation with the unions or tripartite alliance, it must also do consultation with business. Because the skill that can drive performance in government sits in private sector. And therefore, if you consult private sector because it drives investment, remember the role of government is policy. The role of business is investment. You can't want business to invest in a wrong structured, uncapacitated government. It's unheard of. And that's something that we need to take quite very, very seriously.
Okay.
And therefore, when you make strategic, particularly within the economic cluster, you need to consult business, and business must also be happy that the caliber of the ministers recommended for those positions will be able to lead in the right direction. I think it's very critical. And that happens not only exceptionally in South Africa, but throughout the world.
Okay.
That's what happened. I think that's the basis of this phenomena of thinking that government is in isolation to business. Okay. I think it's important for that to take place. So,
okay, John, let me bring you in here. We've run out of time, but the Department of Small Business has a very specific mandate, and its mandate is linked or aligned to, of course, what the NDP proposes. And I just want to choose two, and I just want your quick comment on these. These two are: one, supporting small business through better coordination of the relevant agencies, development finance institutions, and private and public incubators. And the second one I want to mention is reducing the cost of regulatory compliance. As an institute that studies, these things, do you get a sense that this department is actually delivering on that mandate?
No.
John Ludlu, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
John Ludlu.
Oh, okay. Bravuyos, thank you so much for the question. But I should have said earlier that I welcome George as a new member of the Small Business Institute, and he is obviously an autonomous organization. He's entitled to his views. We don't seek to suppress the views of anyone. So I welcome, and I would like to engage with him privately around these views. But Vio, can I please make the 2 points?
Quickly,
the first
please.
one is around what is realistic. The ruling party gets elected onto into running government. This is what we have. We can't change it. What the president has done is he only brought one person out of the ruling party list. That is Mr. Enoch Godongwane, onto the list of people that he can bring to Parliament to become his ministers, right? We as business have to work with them. This is our reality.
Which I think everyone
feel.
Yeah. Which I think is everyone, I mean, everyone agrees on that. But what I was specifically asking you now, because it's something that I hope would get into, the new ministers in tray, What does he do now to reduce the cost of regulatory compliance for small businesses? What does he do now to support businesses through better coordination between and among government agencies? I've got 10 seconds. I don't have more than that.
3 things. The first one, there's a crisis in Gauteng and KZN. There's a crisis of COVID, and there's a crisis of SMEs before COVID.
And that's what she has to deal with. Let's leave it there for now. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Time flies when you're having good conversations. Let me thank you for agreeing to come through. Let's hope that next time we'll budget more time for these kinds of conversations. Black Management Forum President Andile Nomlala, SA United Business President George Sibulela, and Small Business Institute CEO John Rudron. That's all we had for you tonight and this week. To join us again next week, Monday, 8 o'clock sharp. Have a good night and a great weekend.
Yeah.